Welcome back to the channel, everyone. This is Clayton. In 2020, I had an idea for a series on my channel where I document all the movies that I watched over the course of 1 year. Last year, I had released one of the videos in that series, with it being all the movies I watched in 2023, Part 1. Of course, I do plan on maybe re-uploading that video with a better thumbnail and maybe something different to look at than some generic gameplay footage. But regardless, I wanted to put the series in order and start back from the very beginning and go up to current day. I recently wrapped up my 2023 movies watch list, and I started my 2024 one, so I'll be working on that throughout the year as I watch more movies. But in the meantime, I wanted to re-record this video, since back in 2020 I had done my first rendition of this video, and I wasn't necessarily happy with it. Before I start, I wanted to bring up the fact that in 2020, it was actually my shortest year for movie watching. I'd barely watched over, I think 40 films, and with 2023, I've surpassed that greatly with it being my biggest year so far for movie watching. I think I watched over 140 films. That's just something to keep in mind for the next episodes in this series. So without wasting any more time, let's get into it. The first film I watched in 2020 was Fight Club, directed by David Fincher in 1999. The film stars Edward Norton, Brad Pitt, Helena Bonham Carter, Meat Loaf, Jared Leto, etc. I felt that it was a very gritty and action-packed movie that had me on the edge of my seat the whole time. Of course, I watched Fight Club several times throughout the pandemic, since that was the only thing that HBO was showing at the time, since everybody was stuck at home. I enjoy Fight Club, and I actually own a copy of it now on DVD, because for the longest time the original copy I had was broken. Yeah, I enjoy Fight Club quite a lot, and that was the first film I watched in 2020. The second film I watched in 2020 was Species 3 from 2003, which is the third installment to the Species franchise, which was started back in 1995. The first film stars Natasha Henstridge, who has a cameo in the third film. I will get into spoilers here for a little bit. Her character does die. She's replaced by what is supposed to be her daughter. This is, of course, a film about women that are genetically modified with alien DNA, and the government is trying to put a stop to it, and I always found these films to be really gory and just over the top, and I feel like you can't go wrong with movies like this. And but yeah, I enjoy the Species franchise quite a lot, having watched the first and the second film. The third film I watched in 2020 was another one that I watched on HBO, with that being Tammy and the T-Rex from 1994, starring Denise Richards, Paul Walker, and Terry Kaiser from Weekend at Bernie's. This is a ridiculous comedy about a mad scientist that puts a teenage boy's brain in an animatronic dinosaur, and he goes on a misadventure with his girlfriend and her best friend, and they try to stop the evil scientist. From what I heard, there's two different versions of this movie. I watched the R-rated version, but apparently there's rumors that there's a PG cut of the film because the director didn't know if he wanted to make a family film or an R-rated kind of stoner comedy. Yeah, I watched the R-rated version, and I enjoyed the film very much. It was ridiculous. The fourth film I watched in 2020 was Vertigo, directed by Alfred Hitchcock in 1958, starring Jimmy Stewart and Kim Novak. From what I understand, there's a lot of film historians who consider this to be one of the greatest movies of all time, and I think this film dethroned Citizen Kane for greatest movie of all time. Of course, I've seen Citizen Kane, and I didn't personally feel it was the greatest film of all time, but it was very influential. But for those of you that haven't seen Vertigo, from what I understand from back when I'd seen it, the film stars Jimmy Stewart, who is a man who becomes infatuated with a woman that he sees in a painting. He sees this woman in real life that he, of course, associates with that painting. And then after he believes that something bad happened to her, he starts seeing her again, and he pursues her. And that's where the intrigue of the film comes into play. Another interesting fact about the film you might not know of is that one of my film professors had told me in my classroom that back around 2006 or 7, he had done an art installation film where he had gone to the location of Vertigo and done a shot-for-shot match between then and when he had done his film. And I feel that that's another important aspect as to why I can recommend you this film, is because it's very significant to film history and art in general. The fifth film I watched in 2020 was Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, directed by J.A. Bayona in 2018, starring Chris Pratt, Bryce Dallas Howard, Toby Jones, James Cromwell, and others. and this is the fifth installment to the Jurassic Park franchise and the second installment to the Jurassic World trilogy. Personally, since time has passed, I enjoy the film and it's grown on me. I own a copy of it on Blu-ray now. I have to admit that I think a lot of people were really cruel to this movie. I didn't think it was as bad as some people had said it was. I enjoyed a lot of the horror and science fiction aspects of the film. I think they really shine with this one. And I really enjoyed it. For the most part, I've always enjoyed the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World movies, so yeah, I recommend it. Sixth film I watched in 2020 was 1989's Parenthood, starring Steve Martin, Mary Steenburgen, Rick Moranis, Keanu Reeves, and others. I felt that this is a very charming movie that at the end of the day really choked me up at the end. The film is, of course, a tongue-in-cheek comedy about the struggles of parenthood, as well as, like a side plot where Keanu Reeves wants to learn how to become a race car driver, and everybody worried about having children, and just the struggles of being a parent and navigating life. I felt that was very relatable with a film like that, and I thought it was very charming. The seventh film I watched in 2020 was Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, also from 1989, also starring Keanu Reeves as well as Alex Winter. Of course, this is the 1989 film that started it all. Of course, it got a sequel in 1994 with Bogus Journey, and then later on with Bill and Ted Face the Music. Yeah, it's a very enjoyable film. I can remember back in high school, one of my friends had quoted the saying in the film, "There's something strange afoot at the Circle K." Of course, at the time, I didn't fully know what that meant until I'd seen the film. But George Carlin is in this movie, and it's a great time travel comedy about two guys wanting to pass their history exam, where they go back in time and meet up with Napoleon Bonaparte and Socrates, and it's great. You can't go wrong with a movie like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. The eighth film I watched in 2020 was Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes from 2009, starring Robert Downey Jr. as Sherlock Holmes and Jude Law as Dr. Watson. Of course, going on another adventure to thwart the evil Moriarty. I thought that this is a very action-packed and fun movie, and I really enjoyed it. Of course, I kind of messed up by having seen the sequel to it first, with that being Sherlock Holmes: A Game of Shadows. I still enjoyed it anyway, and I still kept up with it, and I recommend it. The ninth film I watched in 2020 was the 1994 comedy Snowboard Academy, starring Jim Varney, Bridget Nielsen, and Corey Haim. I thought that it was a decent comedy, and I thought it was pretty subpar for, of course, having the talent of Jim Varney, who played Ernest P. Worrell in the Ernest movies, and then you have Bridget Nielsen from the Beverly Hills Cop and Red Sonja. I felt that the movie probably could have been better in some places, but it was enjoyable. I thought a lot of the banter with the snowboarders was really dumb and didn't really make a lot of sense, but I don't know. I thought it was decent. The 10th film I watched in 2020 was 1968's Once Upon a Time in the West, directed by Sergio Leone, starring Charles Bronson, Henry Fonda, and Claudia Cardinale. I thought that this is an excellent Western movie. Most people consider it to be one of the best Westerns of all time. I certainly feel that way to an extent. The music was sweeping and wonderful, and it was very dramatic, and it's just all around great. Great cinematography, great performances. You cannot go wrong with a film like this. Highly recommend it. The 11th film I watched in 2020 was the 2013 horror movie The Hunted, starring Josh Stewart as the character of Jake, Ronnie Jean Blevins as the character of Stevie, and Jake's wife, who's played by Nikki DeLoach from The Net 2.0, the 2006 sequel to the 1996 film with Sandra Bullock. The film The Hunted is about two hunters named Jake and Stevie that want to land a hunting television show, and after they go on some excursions in the woods, they start experiencing paranormal activity. After they discover that a girl was murdered in the woods, and now her angry spirit is attacking them, and they don't understand why, and that's basically the whole premise of the film. I will say that the film was very predictable, and that the film was full of product placement for hunting equipment and all sorts of different things. I felt that the film was a little bit shallow in terms of trying to scare or intimidate the audience or the person watching the film. It's very similar to a lot of other horror movies that have been made already, and I thought it was serviceable. I mean, I picked it up because it's not every day you see a horror film based around hunting. I don't know, I thought it was decent. The 12th film I watched in 2020 was the 2002 documentary Bowling for Columbine, directed by documentary filmmaker Michael Moore, speaking of course about the 1999 Columbine shooting, which involved Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris. The film speaks on a number of subjects, ranging from gun violence to weapons of mass destruction and advocacy for the NRA and all sorts of different things. It was a very thought-provoking and interesting documentary, and I definitely recommend it if that's your kind of thing. The 13th film I watched in 2020 was 1997's Air Force One, starring Harrison Ford and Gary Oldman. Of course, this is a movie about the president having Air Force One, the president's personal plane, being taken over by a group of bad guys, and Gary Oldman is their leader, and they have to essentially down the plane so that they can save the president, and it's a very action-packed and thrilling movie. Of course, it's from 1997, so certain things haven't aged very well, like the CGI, but other than that, it's a pretty enjoyable movie. I definitely recommend it. The 14th film I watched in 2020 was 1977's Annie Hall, directed and starring Woody Allen, as well as other supporting actors like Diane Keaton and Paul Simon. I felt that this is a very enjoyable romantic comedy, certainly another great film from Woody Allen, with the fact that I've seen not only Sleeper, but I've also seen Shadows and Fog. I believe I watched that last year, and it was very enjoyable. I certainly feel that it's another great romantic comedy in the pantheon of romantic comedies that have come out since 1977, but I definitely recommend Annie Hall. It's worth the laugh. The 15th and 16th films I watched in 2020 was Resident Evil Extinction and Afterlife, both starring Milla Jovovich and Ali Larter, reprising their roles in the Resident Evil franchise. Of course, with Resident Evil Extinction, it's the sequel to Resident Evil Apocalypse from 2004, and of course Afterlife came after Extinction, so yeah, you can't really go wrong with these movies. They're action-packed, and they're gory and ridiculous, and I believe the first one was directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, and I think he's done a majority of these films, so yeah, they're enjoyable if you just kind of want to shut your brain off and watch something ridiculous. The 17th movie I watched in 2020 was the 1989 dark comedy Cold Dog Soup, starring Randy Quaid, Frank Whaley, and Christine Harnos. The film is about a man who develops a crush on a girl who's played by Christine Harnos, and after he goes over to her mom's house, he finds out that the dog is dead, and then after that, he feels obligated to bury the dog, and Randy Quaid's character decides that that wouldn't be necessary, so there's a whole bunch of hijinks that ensue with this man and this dead dog, and it's a very funny comedy, a highly underrated comedy from 1989, and I definitely recommend it if you can find it. I think the DVDs for it are rare, but they're definitely out there, so keep an eye out for it. The 18th film I watched in 2020 was 2019's Star Wars Episode 9: The Rise of Skywalker, directed by J.J. Abrams, starring Daisy Ridley, John Boyega, Oscar Isaacs, as well as other supporting actors, with this being the 9th installment to the Star Wars franchise, and what was initially the finale of the franchise, but now we've discovered that there might be a Star Wars Episode 10 coming out, as if anybody's excited, but yeah, I felt that Rise of Skywalker was a very enjoyable and fun installment to the franchise. I know that a lot of people don't like it, and a lot of people felt that it was a really awful finale, but I beg to differ. I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was one of the best Star Wars films in the franchise, so, but that's just my personal opinion of the film, of course, with me having seen it, but yeah. Picking up where I'd left off last week when recording this, there was a film that I'd failed to mention on the first half of my list, with that being Peggy Sue Got Married. I watched this film on Turner Classic Movies. It's from 1986, and it stars Kathleen Turner and Nicolas Cage. The film is about a woman who travels back in time to the 1960s so that she can rekindle her marriage with her ex-husband, who's played by Nicolas Cage, who back then was a heartthrob, but he's become embittered over the years. She essentially uses this time travel Deus Ex Machina to essentially fix her broken marriage with her husband. I thought it was a wonderful romantic comedy. It kind of reminds me of Back to the Future, but of course there's no, time traveling car or anything, but it was decent. Moving on with my list, the next film that I watched in 2020 was the 1973 slasher film Pigs, also known as Daddy's Deadly Darling, starring Mark and Tony Lawrence. The film is about a woman who starts relationships with strangers, who kills them, and then has an old man feed them to his pigs at a roadside inn where she is staying at. I believe the film was picked up for distribution by Troma Entertainment for a short time, that of course being the same company that gave us The Toxic Avenger, that was founded by Lloyd Kaufman in the 1970s. With Troma Entertainment being an independent horror film company with a lot of their shock comedies and horror movies, of course, leading to their success. But I enjoyed the movie Pigs. I thought it was decent. It's, of course, a product of its time, with 1973 being a big year for horror movies. I thought it was pretty alright.